you're welcome to check that out. But it really will help you better to understand it from that aspect. The next word is Quran. The word Quran doesn't mean holy book. In fact, I already told you Kitab al-Maqdis is the name of the holy book. That's the Bible. Kitab means book. Maqdis, Quds, means sacred, or Quds, which is the Arabic name for Palestine, the Holy Land. Now, Quran, even Muslims, I told you Muslims have to watch this. What is the first word, I'm asking a Muslim, what is the first word that came of the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Arabic language? Iqra. Very good. And it means? I knew you were going to say that. How many think it means recite? Did Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam know how to read? No. So that would be kind of interesting that Gabriel, for those of you who don't know, Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, went to Muhammad, peace be upon him, and ordered him to recite. Now, why wouldn't the angel know this? Why would he fall? Should we do the wrong guy? What is that? Unfortunately, the people who use that today, some uneducated Muslims use that in a very bad way. They misrepresent the meaning of it. And they will tell you it means read, therefore you have to get an education, therefore you need to get a PhD, therefore you have to sacrifice everything to go out here and get rich so you can take care of your parents, and usually your parents are the ones that are telling you it means read. Did I get pretty close on that one? Yeah. Closer than you want to admit. But in fact, the recitation of the Quran is the secret to understand what it's all about. The Quran is not like the Bible, because it can't have more than one version. There are over 55 versions of the old manuscripts. Old manuscripts. And it's true, there are a lot of them. I don't know the actual count, I'm just thinking what he said. But there's not one single one you can point to and say for sure that's exactly it. But it's very clear there used to be a Bible. Nobody argues that point that knows anything about the history of the Bible. But for a reference on this one, I want you to look into getting a copy of a book. If you don't find it, write to me and we'll see if we can help you. It's called Who Wrote the Bible? It's talking about the Old Testament by Elliott Friedman. Check it out. It gives you a lot of history. That's his forte, that's his bailiwick. Look into it and see. It will help you a lot. I'll also explain to you how they lost all of it during the Babylonian occupation when they were taken out into captivity, and then how it was reconstructed by Hosea, we mispronounce his name in English, we call him Ezra. And he has his own book in the Bible. You can find very clearly from his work, talking about Friedman's work, that in fact this is most likely the person who reconstructed from what he heard from others. This proves that to him, and this is his contention as well as many other biblical scholars, that the works of the Old Testament used to be recited. And this is, if you stop and think, it makes sense because very few people throughout history really knew how to read and write. It's only been in the last maybe 500 or so years there's been a big focus on the common people learning how to read and write. And especially in the last 150 years, there's been a huge emphasis in the Western world for that. But way back then, we're talking 3,000, 5,000 years ago, very few, if any, of the people could sit down and really write out something. But they definitely used to recite it. They used to recite it for each other, and listen to it, and critique it, and re-recite it over and over, and pass it down generation upon generation. The scrolls were preserved in writing and buried, and then they would dig them up on these celebrations, and then they would have a reciter and then be sure that what he was reciting still matched what they had. This is all found in the books that I've just taught you. Now, there's another work. Some Christians will just say, well, that's Jewish stuff, I'm going to go listen to it. Okay. For the Christians, there's the work of F.F. Bruce, and he's a well-known scholar in the Koine Greek, and Aramaic, and he makes some very clear claims about this in his book, The History of the Translations of the Bible to the English Language. And again, if you need any, you'll find that right there. All of that is, it is the recitation of God himself to his angel Gabriel, who then in turn recited it to the prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in pieces, small pieces, sometimes a little bigger, but it took a total of 23 years for all of it to come. And when it came, it was always relative to things that were happening in their lives. Yet today we find that when we look at the words, even in translation, it can have a lot of meaning to our lives as well. The Quran is not written from a human point of view. It's written from God's point of view. That includes the fact that it doesn't run in chronological order. Anytime a human writes a book, they start with, well, in the beginning, and that's exactly how the Bible starts. But that is not the way that the Quran is. It begins not in the beginning, but it begins in the name of Allah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. The Quran has been preserved exactly, word for word, for over 1,400 years. There are not different versions of the Quran. Again, I've been interrupted in my speeches by those who like to cause problems and show off in universities, so I'll save you the trouble. Yes, there are 3 that exist today, one in England, one in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, in the museum there. The other one's in the Topkapi Museum in Istanbul, and I've been there. Okay, just for the benefit of those who don't know, I have been there. And yes, they're different from what we have written because the words are the same, but because they didn't have the diacritical marks in those days. The diacritical marks were never invented for any of the Semitic languages until about the 8th or 9th century. So it wasn't available in Hebrew either. For the reference on this, you can check the Masoretic text. This is the first time there was ever diacritical marks in the Hebrew language in the Bible. And that was 9th century. They followed what the Muslims had done with the Quran. The Semitic languages do not have vowels. You have to find the vowel based on the consonants and how they're structured in the word. If you know the word, then you can understand what it might be. Then in the sentence, you can see what it is. So to make it easy for non-Arab speakers, they put these markings. A slash above a letter meant a slash below a letter meant E, and then a little comma looking over it meant ooh. Oh, wow, I found a difference. Okay. The calligraphy is different, but that's just like style of writing. Other than that, they're identical. But I don't want to refer too much about this part of the Quran because it's really not important. I just told you Quran is recitation. What we need to know is how is it recited today? You heard the Quran in the opening portion of this program. You heard it recited. I promise you, if you'd have missed a single letter, not a word, a letter, there would be plenty of Muslims in here to stop and say, whoa, wait, SubhanAllah. Yes or no, Jay? That's just how it is. Ramadan's coming up. Tarawih is going to happen every night. We read 1/30th of the Quran from memory every single night for 30 nights. This has been going on for the last 1,400 years. All over the earth, Muslim scholars, teachers, leaders, muftis, imams are reading this letter by letter by letter every single night, and there are not 2 versions. There is a bit of a rift between 2 large groups of Muslims. There is a group called Sunnis, a group called Shiites. Shiites are mostly in Lebanon, Iraq, and Iran. And then the Sunnis are pretty much in the rest of the Muslim world. And there have been times throughout history where there's been some competition. But I assure you, they have exactly the same book. There's no difference. We had, the Shiites had a Quran recitation contest in Pennsylvania, in the United States. And they recited exactly word for word the same thing that when the Sunnis had their little thing that they did to some. It wasn't anything